Hi, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of Leap. Thank you so much for being here and tuning in this week. My guest this week, we have kind of a sort of a special story of the way that we met that I'm actually going to let Kelley share the way that the two of us met. And then we are going to jump into her story and the death of her brother, Eric, but a little bit about my guest, Kelley. She right now is the stay-at-home nana to her grandchildren, Trace, who is 7, and Wyatt, who is 5. And she squeezed out this time for us today in her very busy schedule. So thank you so much for being here with us today, Kelley. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. I'm so honored to be here.
So let's just share the fun story of how you and I met. You go, because it was someone gave you the gift of my book.
That's right, exactly. So a dear friend of mine gave me a book. I met her for breakfast, and she said, "I have this gift for you, and it's about a woman who wrote a book about losing her brother." And for some reason, I knew that you had to have it. I've had it in my purse for 6 months, she said, and I was grateful. And I read it, and I immediately, obviously, did not know Susan. I had no idea where she lived. I read her bio, but you never know. And I wrote to her on Instagram, and I'm just like, I am so thrilled to be reading this book. And she wrote back to me immediately, and she's like, "Oh my goodness, this is so exciting." And we lived probably a half an hour away from each other. How ironic. And I worked at Seabags in Freeport at the time. And she said, "I'm going to come and meet you, and I would love to see you sometime." And she walked into my store, and our eyes met. And it was like, we didn't even have to say anything to each other. It was so moving. And there's more to it, but it was just amazing.
The other cool piece about the story is the woman who you gave the book to was also a dear friend of another friend of mine. So anyway, the story circled around, and you had no idea about how much dragonflies meant to me. And this woman who you gave the book to had brought back a bag to the store that you work in. You bought me the bag, and it was a dragonfly. And it was like, when we talk a lot about signs on this podcast that we get from the people who we've lost. And that to me was just another one of those affirmations of the signs are always there, and our loved ones on the other side are always weaving their magic in our lives. And so I think it's incredible the way you and I met, and I am honored to have you on with us today. And I really cannot wait for you to share the story of your brother, because that's the other ironic piece. Your brother died 40 years ago. Is that
41 years in November. Yes. Yep.
And here your friend buys a book for you on sibling grief and loss, which is also like, it's been a long time. And yet your friend still bought you this book. So tell us about your brother, Eric.
Okay. So my brother, Eric, was 7 years older than I am. And we have a younger sister who's 5 years older. There was Gretchen, myself, and then my brother. And Eric and I were typical siblings. We fought and didn't like each other. And then he went away to college, and we became best friends. I just idolized him, and he just thought so much of me. And he went all the way to upstate New York, and it was a long ride. And this was more than 40 years ago. And I was a senior in high school when my brother passed away. But prior to that, when he was in college, my parents would let my girlfriends and I take their car with no cell phone, no nothing, and drive over 8 hours to go stay in this town to visit my brother. And he belonged to a frat house, and I would touch base with my parents. And believe me, I was known as Greener's little sister. If my brother's name was Eric Green, and his frat brothers nicknamed him Greener, so he was known as Greener. And they were like, "Whoa, that's Greener's sister. You have to treat her like unbelievable." So it was just so neat. But sadly, my brother was a senior in college. I was a senior in high school, and he was going to a Patriots game early in the morning. And he and his girlfriend and another couple were in charge of the front of the caravan for the drive. And they pulled over at the store to get juice and coffee and such. And Eric had a Volkswagen Rabbit, and they pulled out onto this long stretch of highway. It was early in November, and it was snowing. And he went to put his seatbelt on, and a car was coming in the opposite direction and T-boned him. And my brother was killed instantly. And it was devastating. I was at home and that morning, and we had a big old farmhouse, and we always came in through the kitchen when you entered our home. And I was home by myself. Obviously, my parents were at our camp in Rangeley, and someone knocked on the side door. And I thought, we don't use that door. And I answered the door, and it was a state trooper. And he asked if that's where my parents lived. And I said, yes. And he said, I need to know how to contact them. And my parents came home 3 hours later and told me that my brother had passed away. And I'm so grateful that that state trooper knew not to tell me, because I'm not the type of person that wants to hurt myself or would have, but if I had found that out by myself, it could have been more tragic for my parents.
And, and here you are 41 years later, and you're so emotional. And, one thing that I know for certain around grief is that there are no clocks or calendars, and it's amazing. Time marches on, but the person that we love is just, they're always right here. Absolutely.
Absolutely. Some days it's happy tears, some days there's no tears, and some days it's right there. Too close sometimes, not too close, but you know what I mean? It's right at the surface again. And you think all this time has passed and it doesn't matter.
And he was your only sibling, is that right?
No, I have a younger sister, Gretchen.
Okay, that's
Yes.
right. You do have a sister, but
Yes.
This was your only brother. So how old was Gretchen when your brother died?
I was 18. So I believe she was like 14. She was young. And my mom had gone to private school. And so my parents wanted to shelter her from all of the horrible stuff that had happened. And they sent her to Gould Academy to private school, trying to let her live a normal life. But looking back, that probably wasn't the best decision, but that's okay. My sister and I, unfortunately, don't have a relationship.
Yeah, it's all coming back to me now when you and I have had a conversation about this. So tell me what life was like for you. I mean, here you are, a senior in high school. You have this tragedy. It's a life shatterer, right? It shatters your life
Yes.
as you know it. It
Yes.
shatters your family's life as they know it. What did life look like after the loss of your brother?
It was so different, and not to bring into other things, but my mom, when I was in 7th grade, my mom had a brain tumor. So I didn't have to, but I was like, I have an older brother and I have a younger sister and I have a father, and I need to step up and take care of this family. So I obviously didn't stop school, but school wasn't important to me. I had that mother instinct right from that young age. I wanted to take care of my family. Thankfully, mom recovered, and then this tragedy happens. So it was horrible. My father was a big burly lumberman, and he just started to shut down. Eric died in November. We took a family vacation to California in February. My dad had always had high blood pressure, and he had just gone off his medicine. Things were really good. And we got to California, and it was like his legs had elephantitis. And we called his doctor, and he said, there's really nothing we can do at this point. Just enjoy your vacation. And so he was sick. So he was sick for a long time after that. My mother was just devastated. Sadly, my parents had lost an infant between Eric and I. And so this is the second time they had lost a child, which is, I can't even begin to fathom. And so they were a wonderful couple and they stayed together, but everything was different. It just changed the whole dynamic.
What about your life? You were in high school. Did you go on to college? Did you feel like you could? What did your life look like?
I finished high school, and then I was going to Fisher Junior College in Boston to become a travel agent. And I did do that. It was very hard, but I did do that. And I was there for 6 months, and my dad was in the hospital in Boston. So I gave up college and I came home to be with my family. I had this yearning that I needed to come home. So I did. But, I still had a wonderful life. I have wonderful friends and wonderful family and a good support system. And Laura, Eric was engaged at the time, and she's my soul sister. And she got married and had her children and had a family. And her and I she's even said to me, I loved your brother and he will always mean the world to me. But sometimes I think I met him so that you and I would be together. We're just each other's. There's no one closer to me than she is.
That's incredible.
Even to this day. Yeah, it's incredible.
So you're telling me you're best friends with your brother's girlfriend from 41 years ago.
Yep. And she was in the accident. Obviously, she and her mother, she checked herself out of the hospital and drove by ambulance to our house to go to that funeral. She had a broken collarbone. She had a broken leg. She was this little teeny tiny frail thing. And we had 3 rented buses of frat brothers that came. I mean, it was just incredible. To back up after losing someone was so heartbreaking, but to see the community and the family and the camaraderie is just incredible. It makes it a little easier for that little short window of time, and then it gets harder, as everything does. But that was incredible to see my brother, who was 18, have such an influence on people literally all over the country. It was incredible. The people, they had to have a speaker outside of our church because there was just no room. There were over 400 people at he was 18 years old, and people came in droves from everywhere to attend his service.
That's
So
incredible.
yeah, it was incredible. But yes, Laura and I we call each other our soul sisters all the time. So we just love each other.
That's amazing. I mean,
Yeah.
it's remarkable. That's why I'm a little bit speechless, because it's remarkable that you could maintain a friendship out of, well, first of all, because you were all so young, you were kids essentially.
Right. Exactly.
And that you were able to maintain this relationship. And especially given the tragic nature of your brother's death. I think that is
Right.
profound.
Mm-hmm.
How did your brother's death, how do you feel like it influenced your life and growing up and becoming an adult? Like, I'd love to hear, because grief changes us, or not grief so much as, well, no, I guess it is grief. When we have a deep loss, the grieving process, if we do the work, and you know what I mean by the work, really
Mm-hmm.
allowing those feelings to come, I think changes us. And I think that it can change us in lots of different ways. So I've got a 2-part question.
Okay.
Do you feel that your brother changed the trajectory of your life? Because I hear that you'd gone to school to be a travel agent, and you came home to help take care of your mom and dad. Because one thing I think that I've talked about is the tremendous pressure I think are on siblings. That's why I think
Yes.
sibling grief is so different, because I think that we have this, or feel like we've got this weight to take care of our parents because their grief is so big and so heavy. And we can get lost, I think, sometimes. Siblings, I think, can get lost in the whole grief process because we have this belief that we've got to really swallow our grief to take care of the parents and the surviving, spouse, if there is one, and kids, if there are kids, and in your case.
Absolutely.
So talk to me about how you feel like your brother's death impacted your life for the long run.
For the long run, he just looked, as, even though he was my elder brother, I know that he looked up to me, and I've learned that. And it's hard. I used to be very shy and very timid, and I had a horrible stuttering problem. And it didn't matter. He was just thought that he was so proud of me and knew I was going to go places. So I've always had that in the back of my mind, and I've always wanted to keep making him proud. And I know that I do. And life hasn't been easy. Life isn't always easy, but I'm proud of the woman that I am today. I'm proud that I had him in my life. I just think it influences me all the time, because I think, how would Eric handle this? How can I change things or make things better with Eric in my mind? I have a force in me that I don't quit. And maybe that comes from my brother. When I need to get strength, I can feel his light and I can feel his presence in me. And he's my drive. He was just everything to me. And just because he's not here physically, oh, believe me, I know he's here. And he just pushes me right along, and I can talk to him and I can feel him, and sometimes even get angry at him. It's all part of it. But I think I wouldn't be the person I am today without Eric in my life. I probably wouldn't be the person I am today if I hadn't experienced this loss, if that makes sense at all. Not that I would change it all in a heartbeat to have him sit next to me right now, but it changes you.
It does.
Does that make sense?
It does make perfect sense, because I've seen so many things over the years, the way grief can change a person. And I write about it, that it can harden the heart. People can get stuck in anger or deep, deep depression. I think it can expand our heart in a way that nothing else can. I think it can deepen our compassion. I think grief can change us in so many profound ways. And I think it can teach us so much about who we are as a human being, what do you feel like your brother's death, what did you learn about yourself, or what have you learned over the years in this, what I like to call it, the hole that they've left behind, create space for new things to bloom? So, yeah, I think I'm just going to ask the question that way. What gifts have shown up in your life as a result of your brother's death, if that makes any sense at all?
Oh, it most definitely does. My strength. I mean, I've been stubborn since day one. My parents can tell you that, but I don't know. I just feel like I need to move forward and he's helped me. I still want to make him proud, no matter, I mean, I'm going to be 59 years old and it just still means a lot to me. But without, like you said, instead of going to the dark side and being sad and depressed, do I have my days? Yes. But he opened my heart. He makes me look at life different every single day. And I can look at something and think, this is how I'm going to deal with it. And then I think, well, I wonder how Eric would do it a little different. And maybe I crisscross him a little bit, or maybe I try a little bit harder, or maybe say, no, I'm going to do it like me today. But it's a huge influence on me every day, because he was just a go-getter and was determined. And you don't quit and you give it your all. And if you've done that, then that's okay. But don't just, I can't do that just because. Well, why can't you do it? Get out there and do it. And that's what I try to do.
Yeah, don't give up.
Yeah.
So I'm interested, I keep going back to just how young you were. Like, I lost my brother and I was in my 40s, because I think about the nuclear family, because you're not just living with your own grief, you're literally immersed in this very dark cloud within the house. You can feel it, right? I mean, you can physically feel grief. So you stayed home, but they sent your sister away.
Yes.
And what was that like? Because now that feels like a double loss, because here you are in the home finishing your senior year. Now your brother died. I get that he was at college, but he's gone. And now they're sending your younger sister away. What was that experience like for you?
It was weird. I mean, my mom was so proud. I think they also did it because mom was so excited to have her daughter going there. Maybe it gave her a reason to get up and to feel, to give her something to do. And she just wanted the best for my younger sister, which of course we all did. But it was weird. You're right. It was an emptiness. And as far as grief goes, my sister's handled it totally different, and not in a bad way, but hers, she's stuck. She hasn't let go of any of it. She can't move forward. She can't express things. It's like she emotionally is still that age. And I'm not saying that to be mean at all, but looking at it's just completely different. Where I think in the comparison, when you ask life how I've handled it, I've still somehow managed to flourish. And I'm proud of that. And I'm not afraid to express my emotions or ask for help. And then it hurts to see how other people handle it sometimes. So in that aspect, I'm very, very proud of it. And yeah, it was weird. It was all really, really weird. My family, the whole family dynamic fell apart. And even though we were together, death destroys you.
But no, well, the reason I asked is because, again, going back to this idea of sibling loss, when you've got this whole family and everybody is dealing with it differently, but as kids, your brains aren't even fully developed to even understand how to begin to deal with this loss. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, their parents, they are in their own deep grief trying to survive this event. And now they're sending their daughter away thinking that this is somehow going to shelter her. But we know that these are just different ways that people cope. But one of the big misnomers, I think, around sibling grief is that, and I've talked to numerous siblings, as you know, I interviewed a ton of people for my book, that one of the beliefs are, and I call it erroneous because we know it's not true, is that we feel this need to not mention our sibling's name to our parents. Somehow we think we're going to cause more pain. We know that that's not true, right? Because it's on their mind every single day, every minute of the day. So what happens within this family is you've got this gigantic hole in the family with this child is no longer there. And families feel like they can't talk about it. They can't speak the name. Was that your experience within your family? Or did you feel like you really did have the latitude to talk about your brother Eric after his death? What did that look like for you guys?
Actually, for me, it was different. We talked about him a lot. My mom talked to, my parents talked about him. I talked about him. I remember my mom coming to me and saying, and like I said, he was my idol. I probably had my first beer with him. I did, you know what I mean? He was just my big brother, and that was okay. And she came to me and said, "You need to tell me everything that your brother ever told you. I want to know it." Because she was convinced that he had used drugs, and because that was her own grief, she was thinking the absolute worst and wanted someone to tell her that wasn't it. And I had nothing bad to share, but I had to say to her, "I'm not telling you everything, Mom. I don't have to. Eric and I had our own relationship. And I know you have this demon, if you will, inside of you, eating you away, thinking that you could have saved him because he was your son. And even though it was a car accident, but there are some things I can't share with you, and that was really tough. I remember her saying that to me. And even at 18 years old, I'm like, I don't have to tell you any of that if I choose not to. I only have what's in my heart and in my memories, and no one's going to take those away from me. And she understood that. It was hard, but she respected me for saying that. And I'll never forget having that conversation with her. But that was tough. First of all, you don't talk back to your parents no matter how old you are. And second of all, it was just a very hard thing. But I was like, this is all I have, and you're not taking that from me.
Wow, that's pretty powerful. I know you're going to make me cry too. I always end up crying at some point during these interviews because, you're reminding me of a groundbreaking article that came out about sibling loss. And I feel like it came out in, I want to say 2017. And, one of the big beliefs that we hear all the time is that there's nothing worse than losing a child. And the psychologist had this groundbreaking research around what it's like for a sibling to lose a sibling and what it does to the survivors.
Right.
And that it can be equal, if not more devastating than it is for a parent to lose a child, because it's a very different relationship. There's nobody who knows us like our siblings, even if it's
That's right.
Even if it's an estranged. I mean, my brothers we have secrets that my parents will never know about, and you're kind of each other's secret keepers. I'm sitting here saying this. I'm not naive enough to know that I get not all siblings get along, but that's what I
Right,
mean.
right.
Like, even if it's an estranged relationship, still no one knows you like your siblings do, right? You're with each other from birth. And I remember this saying, I've said it 1,000 times in this podcast, and I'll say it again, that I heard this many years ago, shortly after my brother died, that parents lose the past, spouses lose the future, but siblings lose both, because we assume we're going to grow old together. And
Right.
I went to this medium not too long ago, and she said, and my brother came through, and for those of you who believe in mediums out there, you guys know how much I love mediums. And she said to me, "Your brother wants to apologize to you." And I said, "For what?" And she said that he had to leave, that he's not there with you being your brother. And I mean, literally, I started to bawl, because your siblings they're your rock. If you've got a good relationship with your siblings, they're your rock. They're the ones that have your back. You can have best friends, but with your siblings, it's like they help take care of your elderly parents. Like, they do all the things.
Right.
And Rocky was the one after my mother's stroke who flew in from Bali, and
Mhm.
he was my rock. So, just listening to you talk to about just your older brother, and I'm sure he was your idol, right? I mean, he was just enough older in college. And like you said, you just started to get along, right? Like, you fight like cats and dogs when you're younger.
Oh, yeah.
But then you become best friends if you're lucky enough to have that
Mhm.
with your siblings. And so I appreciate the story that, that there were some things between you and Eric that were sacred, and that you
Right.
couldn't share that with your mother, but also that she accepted that, which I think is
Right.
also pretty cool. I think that speaks volumes about your mother too.
Right. I can't say she accepted it immediately, but in time she was able to understand.
Did any of you guys do any grief work? Did anybody in your family? Because this was a long time ago, and I'm just curious
My parents did go to counseling and I did too. I don't remember if my sister did or not, but yeah, I went to therapy for a long time and it helped. And when therapy wasn't, like you said, is today, that people go to therapy. It's a good thing. We applaud you, but I do remember going to counseling. So yeah, made a huge difference to have
And
someone understand.
and do you feel like it changed the relationship with your own parents?
Between my parents,
But your
oh,
relationship with your parents.
a little bit. I think it always does. And I will say that my dad ended up dying 3 years later, 2 months earlier to the day. He died of a broken heart. His body just shut down. I got the call from the doctor. My parents weren't home, and he died of a broken heart. His corpuscles, his body became inflamed, and his corpuscles leaked body fluid, and there was no cancer. There was no organs that had shut down. His body drowned in its own sadness, which was
Wow.
so very hard to take. Yeah. Yeah.
How old was your
Especially,
father?
he was a lumberman. He was this big burly man with a big beer belly who worked from dawn until dusk and literally was in a wheelchair and bedridden and just couldn't do anything. He shut down emotionally, and it was devastating to see. My dad was 46.
So now you've lost your brother. Your sister's off at school. You've lost your brother. Your dad dies 3 years later. So you would have been a junior in college, but you came home because your father was
Right.
ill, right? You said that your
Right.
family. And then when did you lose your mom?
And then after my father passed away, my mom's cancer came back. And so I was home. And so I stayed home and took care of her. I was her caregiver for 3 years. And I had met my husband, and we weren't married yet. And then I decided to quit my job. I was just working part-time at the factory or at the plant where my husband works. And I went to Aruba with my girlfriend for 2 weeks. And mom she had been on medicine because seizure control, and she had a lot of scar tissue that was causing a lot of her problems. And I could tell her balance was off. And I said, Mom, do you want me to cancel my trip? And she said, No, you need to go. I'm going to be fine. And this first Saturday of my trip, I had been there 1 week. I got a phone call that her cancer was back and I had to fly home. So I flew home. They removed the rest of the cancer. They consider it the type of cancer, it fingered throughout her brain, so they could only remove some of it. I mean, they literally could not remove all of it. And so her damage was from the scar tissue. She basically had dementia. Her left side was paralyzed, and she was having a hard time with her memory. But I had her home, and she was in a hospital bed and didn't ever want to bother anyone. And she tried to get up and use the bath at commode by herself, and she fell and broke her opposite collarbone. And I had to call for help. And I said to the doctor, how am I going to do this? And he said, you can't do it anymore. And I put my mom in a nursing home in her mid-50s. And she lived until she was 63. That woman wasn't giving up for anybody. And she was good for the most part. She really failed the last couple of years, but she knew I had children. We went to visit her. God bless my husband. He would drive and pick her up on every holiday. He would leave our home and drive and get her, snowstorm, rain, sleet, sunshine, get the van, lift her into the van, bring her here, get her settled, bring the van back so another family could use it. Sometimes he made 6 trips just so that she could be here for maybe 2 hours with our family, which was just incredible. And she died at 63. After Gretchen, my sister's first child, was born, my mom died a week later. So she shut down and she knew that Gretchen was safe. That's another aspect of it also. Mom was very happy. She loved my husband, and she knew I was happy and I was content and I had children. But Gretchen, after she went to Gould Academy, she went to school in Philadelphia. So with Mom's illness, she would call me and say, I think your sister's here in the nursing home. I can hear her voice. And I'd be like, no, Mom, Gretchen is in Philadelphia. Gretchen met someone. She got married, got pregnant with her first child. And once Mom knew, okay, my other daughter is where I want her to be, she let go and she passed away. So my mom
Wow.
was something else, to say the least.
I'm just so in awe. I mean, your parents both died so young.
Very young. Yeah, very young.
And you
So
were this family caregiver.
And I'm still being a caregiver today. I always will be. It's fine. I love that. I think that's what I meant to do. It's my passion. Whether I'm selling someone a sea bag or taking care of my grandchildren or helping someone who needs help. And I see it in my grandchildren too. We were walking into the store one day and I said to someone who walked past me, I said something to him, and my at then 6-year-old grandson turned to me and said, Nanny, you're just amazing. You're so kind to everyone. And I started to cry because I didn't realize that. But for that little 6-year-old to recognize that and see that in me, what more of a gift could you ask for?
Well, when I asked you how you wanted to be introduced, I was so eager to jump into your story that I didn't mention it, but you said what you want to be remembered for is your kindness. And that in and of itself is, I think, so beautiful. And I'm looking at the tattoos on your skin and I see the butterfly. And
yes.
And so the same reader told me that, we know that butterflies are one of the, sort of the spiritual indicators. A lot of people believe that butterflies are a message from the other side. And I had this reader tell me that the butterfly was a sign from my mother. And so it was just funny because when you first got on, the very first thing I noticed was the butterfly. Is there meaning behind that butterfly on your arm?
My husband we were in Boothbay and he took a picture of this, and that's why I have this one. I have another butterfly, and this isn't my first tattoo in memory of my brother. And it says forever greener, greener being Eric's nickname. And it has a butterfly. The story behind that is my parents had Eric's body obviously brought home, and we were planning a funeral, and it was in a small town in Maine in Buckfield. And it was an old colonial house is where the funeral was at. And it had been closed up. It's the middle of December. And so they went and met the funeral director, and there was a big fireplace or a mantle. And this funeral planner is talking to my parents, and he notices my mother is just in this daze looking at something. And he says, Mrs. Green, is there something I can get you? Are you okay? And she said, there's a vase on that mantle and there's something inside of it. And they went and they grabbed the vase and they went to the door. And in this closed up colonial funeral home was a butterfly that was in this vase that they released and let go. And I never, ever wanted a tattoo. I was not a tattoo person. And I only got this about 8 years ago. And I said, that's what I want. I want forever greener, forever Eric will be in my heart. And with that butterfly, because that butterfly, Eric's spirit is still out there in butterflies. Isn't that incredible?
How did your mother know something was inside the vase? Did she see something trying to get out?
It was like a clear vase sitting, and like I said, it's in this little small town. And so it's not like it's in the city and it's hustle and bustle. The gentleman went and got the key, and it probably had to turn the furnace on and warm it up. And so they're just sitting there planning this funeral with these two grieving parents. And my mother kept, and she's like, there's something over there. Something is in that vase. We must look at what that is. And it was a live butterfly in this funeral home in the middle of November. Isn't that crazy?
Well, I wanted to ask you, one of the questions I wanted to ask you was, what was if you even had any, but what was your belief about death in the afterlife before your brother died? Do you even remember?
I really didn't know. I hadn't really experienced, I had lost a great uncle or my great grandmother, but I was still so young. It took me a long time to figure it out. And I think we still do. But Laura, my soul sister, she always said, she went to a well-renowned psychic. She had made this appointment and she really wanted to go, but Eric always knew that he wasn't going to live to be an old man. He knew that. And the psychic told Laura that. And she said, Eric his soul knew that his purpose wasn't here on earth to live forever. And he was prepared. And I have a picture of him. They were in Bailey's Island and he's on a boat and he's looking into the horizon. And that was the September before he passed away. And it's the most beautiful picture. But I just find that so incredible to know that. And she said, Eric is with you sometimes, he's with your family, sometimes he's with his sister, and he's just doing miraculous things all over the world. He's doing what he was meant to do. Whether you believe me or not, she said, Eric is doing what he was meant to do. This is what God wanted him to do.
Yeah,
which is so incredible.
Well, I believe all of that stuff. There's no question in my mind that we work on the other side. We have jobs on the other side, 100%. And I think that the question that comes up for people will be like, why do they say if there's reincarnation and we come back, then how can they be there waiting for us on the other side, et cetera? And I talk about this book called Destiny of Soul, Journey of Souls. And it was the best way. It's the best book I've read to help me understand, to put more meat around the bones of all of these different concepts that I've read about. But the way that this author, Michael Newton, describes it is that our soul, the essence of who we are, is pure light and love. But it's so powerful that the whole of our soul can't come here because it's too big, it's too powerful, it's too bright, etc. So just a percentage of our soul. I know this is probably way out there for some people listening, but
I totally get it.
So that we actually are part of, our spirit is on the other side, and we also can reincarnate, because that was the one thing that used to really bother me. I'm like, how can that be that people tell me I'm going to see my loved one, and yet I do believe in reincarnation, and how can both of those things be true at the same time? And
right,
that is why I love the Michael Newton book, Journey of Souls, because I was like, oh my God, for the first time, it made complete sense to me that part of us always stay on the other side in our spirit world and do what we do. And then a percentage of our soul, I'm probably not explaining it very well, but you get the idea.
Completely. Yes. I'll have to read that. That sounds fascinating.
I loved that book so much. Do you feel like you've had signs from your parents since their passing?
Well, yes, I went to, before meditation and yoga was really big. This is probably, not that it hasn't been big, but 15 years ago, I attended this. It was a breath class. I was working at a salon, and this woman came up to me and she said, she goes, I'm not trying to be too personal, but is something bothering you? She goes, your throat chakra I can just like see it from here. And I'm like, okay. So I walk out back with her. And so she does a little Reiki on me. And she said, I attend this breath class and I really think that you should go. And so I thought, okay. So I went. It was in Auburn, and it was like in a yoga studio, and we laid out mats. And what they do is they have you do rhythmic breathing, like a breathing from your diaphragm, like infants do. If you watch an infant inhale, their belly gets really big and they're really inhaling that oxygen and using it properly, which we don't. We're so tense and so caught up in things. And so as you do this, you can feel that we're all just atoms, and it's incredible. So anyway, so I'm doing this, and during these times, I would go like once a month, and you just kind of lay there, and some people cry, some people laugh, some people talk in tongue, whatever the case may be, they're sad. And so this couple would do it, and we're in this long hall, and he would be talking and playing music, and his wife would come and give us Reiki or whatever we needed, and neck pillows, and put a blanket on us if we were cold. And so I could feel Paula at my shoulders, and I was shivering, and I could hear Christopher's voice, the gentleman, and she put a blanket on me, and I was shivering because I was so cold. And I opened my eyes, and she was at one end of the hallway and he was at the other, and I could feel someone's hands on my feet. And for that night, I was thinking about my father, and I was like, my father literally just grabbed my hands and warmed my feet. I've never experienced anything like that in my life, but I knew that everyone else was laying on the floor and quiet and in this deep meditative state. And here I checked, and you could just feel it. You know how you can feel when someone touches you. So I have to say, most definitely that time. That was fascinating.
I love these stories of signs that we get, because like I said, you've got people who believe, people who don't believe, people who aren't sure. And, I know that my brothers and I have talked, and, and I've got one brother who's like, I don't feel like I've really gotten any signs. And I'm like, well, do you believe in signs? Because I think that, one, I think you got to believe, and two, you have to pay attention. And
100%.
And like people will talk about that they've had visitation in the dreams. I've never had a dream visitation, but I feel like I've had other signs. And you talk about meditation. I think meditation is something that we constantly always hear about, right? Meditation. And, and I think some people think about meditation, that you're in this trance for an hour. And sometimes meditation, like at the heart of meditation, the whole point is to quiet the mind to get still. I mean, that's sort of the acronym of LEAP, is being able to deeply listen and engage in that process and allow the emotion to come and then process those emotions in some way. And in meditation, that's what happens. It allows us to learn, and it takes practice to quiet the monkey mind, because I think that when we're able to do that, we are more in tune with the essence of who we are, that soul. I think about a visual as sort of like this river that is this gushing river, but you go deep enough and there's stillness. And that's the way I think about meditation, is getting to the stillness of who we are, where we can open up and be more aware of things that we miss. But I also know that you don't have to be in a deep meditative state to experience a sign, right? You and I have talked about this. It's just being aware. Just because I think that we can get so caught up in our mind that we miss things all the time around us.
Right,
you know?
100%.
And I remember one of the mediums I went to, I just felt like I wasn't getting signs from my mother. I'm just like, I don't feel like, with my brother Rocky, I feel like I get them all the time, but I was like, I don't feel like I'm getting signs from my mother. And the medium laughed and she said, your mother is way too busy on the other side. She's busy. She's doing things. And she said, but you can ask for her to show up. And so I want to know, have you ever intentionally asked for a sign from your brother, your mother, your father, or have you just sort of acknowledged when they show up in your life?
I haven't asked intentionally for a sign. I do see signs. I can feel them when they're around me. This is a beautiful time of the year with the butterflies, so I feel like Eric's around me all the time. I listen to my body. I might be really emotional one day or sad, or just be like, I can't get it. And I'll realize that yesterday was mom's birthday, or tomorrow is the anniversary of her passing, or I pay attention to those signs. But no, I just feel my family around me. I just so feel them around me all the time. And I'm very fortunate for that. I would say mom and Eric more, not in a bad way about dad, but I don't feel that, except for that one experience. Maybe every now and then he really gives me one and knocks me off my feet so that I don't forget. I like to think, but I definitely know my family's around me for sure.
Well, my dad died when I was 10 months old, my bio dad, and my dad that, has been with me since I was 2 years old. But my bio dad, I didn't know him. And again, going back to a reader, my dad popped in. I don't sit around and think about, I was 10 months old. I was a baby,
right?
But yet here he showed up to give me this a message. And do I sit here and think, oh, is my dad here? No. But I wonder too sometimes, because I think we are so powerful. And I do think that we all have this ability to communicate telepathically. Sometimes I think we chalk it up as a coincidence if you're thinking about somebody and they call, for example. But I think It really is our ability to telepathically talk to each other and feel each other, and I don't think any of those things are coincidences. And I think it's also true for us with our loved ones on the other side, that if we need them, we can intentionally talk to them. We can feel them. I read this beautiful, I can't remember where I read this. In some book I was reading, it was around how do you get in touch with your loved one on the other side? And it said, you sit and you close your eyes and you picture the person that you love. You can feel them, maybe smell them if they had a certain cologne or perfume that they wore. And then you can ask them for a very specific sign, whatever it is. I don't care what it is. And then wait 24 to 48 hours. And I bet it shows up. So I'm telling listeners, try it, practice it, just see what happens. You have nothing to lose, And so anyways, I did share this story before. So this woman tried this and her son was a boxer. And she asked to see boxing gloves. And she was at a conference for 3 days. And she used boxing gloves because she thought there was no way that she would ever see boxing gloves. And this woman in front of her dropped her keys during this conference. And she leaned down and she picked up the keys, and on the keys were boxing gloves. And it's one of my favorite stories.
That's incredible.
Yeah. And I think it is believing and it's asking and then it's thanking our loved ones when we feel them or they show up or we gain strength from them. As you said, you feel that strength and that determination. And I I think that there's so much that we don't know and can't understand. But I do think, as I said, that grief can really help to expand our understanding of the pure magic that happens in the universe that we can't see, you
I so
know?
agree. I do have to say, as far as signs from Eric, my little grandson Trace, all he wants to learn, he's such an old soul and he loves to go to the cemetery. And we hadn't been there. So he asked me if we could go visit the cemetery. So there's my younger sister, and there's my dad, and there's my mom, and Eric. And I have this beautiful picture of him. And he just looked at all of the graves, and then he just sat and he sat and just touched Eric's gravestone. And I so see Eric in him all the time. He's so smart, and he loves music, and and he's not afraid to ask questions, and he's very curious about death and dying, God. And you can ask him any question about the Beatles and he will have the answer for you. But I just find it so interesting. But I look at him and I'm like, Eric's right here. I really feel that a lot lately. It's just so cute to see that. I love it.
That's awesome.
One last thing about different things and people. So when my mom passed away, my maiden name, but our family name is Green. And my mom was so proud to be Dale Green, and she loved that name. So our cemetery is in Buckfield, and it's way in the back in this beautiful pasture field, if you will. And there's a wire fence that is on the side of it. And so the day that my mom died, my best friend's family got there at the funeral. It was outside service. It was in August. It was just like the days we've had. It was a day like 9/11. It was that crisp blue sky, and it was just a beautiful day. And we had a service, but my best friend's family got there, and the whole picket fence had green balloons on it because all Mom wanted was for everyone to release a green balloon at her service. And at that time, I'm like, Mom, it's more work for me to do. And I don't know. And I don't really think we should do that. But I was so thrilled when I drove in. So we had a beautiful service, and our family minister did the service. And he said the benediction, and we all took a green balloon after the benediction, and we let them go. And it's as bad as it is now that we realize, but it was such a beautiful day. And we let the balloons go, and there were probably 60 to 100 of them in the air until we could no longer see them. And then one green balloon went off all by itself. You could see it brings tears to my eyes because that green balloon, she was like, okay, this is my time to depart. And she got her wish, and her family was there. And she was with her family on the other side, and off she went for this next trip. It was just incredible. So that's definitely a sign. I have a little girl with a green balloon, and that's me remembering my mom because I was a little towhead when I was little, and that green balloon, and that's me and my mom right there.
I love the homage that you're paying to your family with these beautiful tattoos because I've got a tattoo on my ankle.
Yes.
It's a dragonfly, and it has my brother's name in the wing. And it's just funny when you said I was never a tattoo person because I felt the same way. But all the tattoos on your body have this deep meaning, and I just think
exactly.
And that is just like this physical indicator of how we move forward with, we don't move on, we move forward with the spirit of these people that we have loved so deeply. And I've heard people describe grief as that you grow your life around your grief. I've heard lots of different things. And something else I heard the other day was we grow through our grief, which I thought was also incredibly powerful.
Very much.
One of the things that I wrote about was how beautiful things bloom in the space that our loved ones leave behind. And so I love this image of growing through our grief because it's all encompassing. It's just miraculous to be alive.
Exactly.
But what's even more miraculous, the heart is the first organ to grow in our body, and we are able to love so deeply. And the flip side of that is we're able to grieve so deeply. And those two things coexist They
Right.
coexist. We never stop loving and we never stop grieving their absence, but we weave the spirit of who they are into the fabric of our lives.
Hmm.
And I think that that's one of the things I love about the tattoo. I think it's just this branding on our skin of that you're always with me. And obviously tattoos are not for anyone, everyone, but that is why I got mine.
Exactly. Yes.
Anyways, we are coming to the top of the hour. So you know the last question I love to ask is, you are a caretaker. You have been a
Hmm.
caretaker for many years. And one of the things that happens as therapists is that we can often forget self-care. And that is very true for caregivers. How do you take care of yourself? What does self-love look like for you?
That's a tough question. I make sure and take time for myself. And I think for me, and this is going to sound very strange, but I was just going to say to you too that another way for therapy for me is I'm not afraid to talk about my story. People you met, even if you came in and met me at my place of work or place of employment, or people that I've known, and then as I get to know them, or I'll tell them my story, and they're like, you would never ever know that from the person that you are. You would never have any idea that you had so much loss. But I think that that's also how I take care of myself, because I'm not ashamed of any of my stories. This is my life. This is what makes me who I am. And I just love to share, not in that, oh, guess what happened to me? Not wow, wow, like that, but it's who I am. But you just have to take care of yourself. You have to take time for yourself, whether it's sitting on the deck or meditating or sitting outside, or I go to the cemetery a lot. That sounds really funny, but when I have had a day and I just need to do something, Mark will say, I bet you went to the cemetery. And I'll just go and sit and I'll talk and I'll laugh or I'll cry or I'll do nothing. But that's my safe place. That's my family. So I don't know if any of that makes sense. It's hard for me I'm a very busy Nana and to take time for myself, but I just do what I feel I need to and just love myself the best I can. I take care of those emotions and I cry. I guess honestly, that's probably the biggest self-love that I do is I'm not afraid to cry. It might be at 7 in the morning. It might be at noontime. It might be all day. It might not be for 3 months, but I'm not afraid of emotions or feelings, or I am who I am. And no one's going to change it. And I don't need to be ashamed of it. If that at all makes sense, it may not, but
I mean, being able to share your story and feel emotion that is how we don't get stuck. That's how emotion moves through us and we can
right.
let it go when we allow ourselves to feel it and not swallow it back and not choke on it. And it takes, I think, to be really vulnerable is scary for people. And I
Hmm.
think that when we show emotion, we can feel very vulnerable. And so thank you for sharing that, because I am also a deep believer in honoring how I feel. And I feel the same
Right.
way. If I want to cry, I cry. If I want to yell and scream, I do that too, because it's honoring how we feel.
Exactly.
And that is what allows us to move that energy, to move that pain. So Kelley Green-Chartier, I am so thankful for you spending this time with us and for sharing your story, but also for sharing your essence. I mean, I've now talked to you a few times and you have such a joyful, bright spirit about you. And you've had to live with tremendous loss and grief in your life. And so thanks for sharing your light with us.
You are so welcome. Thank you. I'm honored. And I guess the last thing I will say is when people say, oh, I'm so sorry for your loss. How are you? My best friend said to me when he found out that Eric passed away, she came in and she goes, dear Kelley, dear God, how am I going to ever be able to handle this? And I thought, how are you going to be able to handle this? I just lost my brother. But anyway, my point is when people say, I'm sorry you've had such loss, I'm like, don't be sorry, because I had a brother and I still have a great brother, but you know what I mean? It
Yeah.
just, I'm honored. I'm honored to have been with you. I'm honored to have Eric in my life and my wonderful parents and the people around me. And, life goes on. And I love the web that you talked about, and we're heart and we're love and we're grief, and we are. And you just
Yeah.
have to find comfort in that to keep moving forward.
So, people, where can they find you? I know you have an Instagram channel and I know that you have a Facebook channel, and we'll have this in the show notes too. But can
Sure.
you tell us if people want to get in touch with you?
Most definitely. So on Facebook, it's Kelley, it's Kelley, green, like the color, hyphen Chartier.
Is it hyphen?
CHA.
It's not an underscore, it's a hyphen.
It's a hyphen. Yeah. I kept
Yeah.
my last name, and my brother was not able to carry on our last name. So that's why I hyphenated my last name when I got married, to honor my dad.
And
So
so Chartier is the way you pronounce it, but it's actually spelled Chartier, Chartier.
That is correct.
And again, we'll have that in the show notes. And that's your Instagram and Facebook. Are they the same?
Instagram is different. It's Kelley_Dale_GC.
And is that Dale, Dayle underscore
DALE.
DALE? Okay.
My mom's name.
Underscore. And then what's the end of that?
GC. Yeah. Yeah.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much. And thank you all for tuning in and listening. Please like us and share if you think somebody else can benefit from this content. And I'll see you guys all here next week. Have a blessed week. Bye for now.